Understand? Yeah. Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Okay, apa khabar semua?
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi.
Okay, how's everybody? Okay.
Okay, sir.
Despite the new MCM, so hopefully everybody fine and make sure we take care of ourselves. Okay, today we are going to continue from where we left last class. What we'll be talking about basically will be, okay, to finish up this chapter number 1, we will overview the Malaysian economy in terms of the government expenditure, the size of the government, then the revenue, then, what types of expenditure does the government do, and then that would be chapter number 1. If we have time, we'll move on to chapter number 2. So let us continue. And where we left last class, we were looking at the circular flow of the economy, where we have introduced the government. And when you have government, we call the economy mixed economy. We look at the size of the government. How do you measure the size of the government? Conventionally, we compare the government size to the GDP. So what we do is the total expenditure of the government, we will make it divide by the country's GDP. So the size of the government, okay, size of G, is not absolute, it's relative. You compare it to the GDP. So it will be equal to the total expenditure of the government divided by the GDP. So that would give you a ratio or percentage, which tell us the size of the government. So let me go back to the slide that we were showing last time. And I think I put that slide into the WhatsApp group. So you have a copy of that slide, the PowerPoint. And I will show you the slide where you have the size of the government as the ratio to the GDP. So that's how you measure the size of the government. Okay, how big the government is, it's in terms of the ratio to the GDP. So that is the common measure. Now, if you look at the size of the government, relative, I mean not relative, for other countries, this is in 1995, of course, this is an old data. You will see here, okay, some ratio or percentage, giving us a few countries. These are mostly developed countries. You'll see here Sweden about 67%, Germany about 50%, and Japan about 37.6%. So these are the relative size of developed countries' government. What about Malaysia? So what is the relative size of the government of our country? So this is what we're going to do today. All right, we're going to look at some numbers for a few years, and we determine what is the size of the Malaysian government. All right, so we do that afterwards. Now for the, yeah, that one is PPF. We already looked at it. I think this one we already do discussion. Okay. Right. Here is the expenditure of the government, and then the sources of revenue. Okay, this is some size of the government for a few years. This is many years ago. So for our country, it's about 35%, about range to 30 to 35. Of course, the numbers, the percentage are different. If you look at the earlier period in 1970s, where we are really developing, that period, okay, the government size is much larger. Okay. Now, for the government of Malaysia, if you break out the government expenditure, like I said earlier, the total expenditure, what are the components of the total expenditure? For our country, we follow this breakout. One is operating expenditure, the other is developing. So the total expenditure is the sum of the operating expenditure, development expenditure. Now, operating expenditure is like consumption expenditure. This is for, to maintain the government. That will include the emoluments, the transfers, subsidies, the salaries to government staff, So these are the operating, to operate the government. Development is like investment. This is where, if the government wants to build a new school or new hospital, that will come under development. So you have the economic services, social services, security, and others. So generally, okay, the development is more like investment, which contribute to capital goods. Consumption or operating is simply consumption. We'll be just go as consumption. In terms of revenue, so let's look at the ratio that I wrote there. So for our country, total expenditure divided by GDP, and the total expenditure is equal to the operating expenditure, I call it OE, plus the development expenditure, I call it DE. So for every year, you got that. Of course, this operating expenditure, there are a number of components. And the development expenditure, you will see also they will break out into a number of components. So we come up with the total expenditure. All right. Now look at the revenue side. Yeah, the revenue side, it means to cover the expenditure, the government need revenue. So the revenue will come from basically taxes, okay? And some other sources of revenue. So you'll see here the breakout is one, income tax, which are the corporate income tax, the personal income tax, and here one is the petroleum tax, mainly from Petronas. And then you have the indirect tax, which is coming from the sales tax. excise tax, sales tax, or export-import duties and other taxes. And the other would be non-tax revenue. Non-tax revenue is when the government sell one of its asset. If you look at recently, you know, the government has no money, so they sell one asset, right? They sell a piece of land or one building. And the other source is by borrowing. So that is the sources of revenue. And then you have the breakout of the development expenditure. And then you also have, yeah, this is the what I'm repeating myself. So what I will do, okay, we will look at the Malaysian data, okay, for selected years, and we will see, you know, what is the size of the government relative to the GDP. So what I will do, I will show you firstly our revenue and the total expenditure. Let me okay. Hey, can you see the screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Because sometimes, you know, I don't know whether it works. Okay, this is for the year 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. And you will see this is the federal government financial position. In other words, the government finance for these 2 years. Okay, the first row is the revenue. And then you will see, now this revenue will come from the sources I just stated earlier, okay, different sources. And this is the total operating expenditure, and this would be the development expenditure. And here they give you also the deficit. And then we have the deficit in terms of percentage to the GDP. So this is the first one that we're going to look at. So what I would like you to do, okay, I want you to write down, okay, because we're going to compute this, all right, for just 1 or 2 years. So we're going to do for the year 1918 and the year 2017. So for this, just 2 years, because I'm going to show you some other data, all right? Firstly, we're going to compute the size of the government. So what you need, we need the total operating expenditure, and then we need the development expenditure. So you write down, okay, the total development expenditure, and then the total operating expenditure. Where is it? Okay, I think you just use the gross. Okay? Just use the gross. So for 2017, it's 44.9 billion. Or 2018, it's 54.9 billion. Now you look at the operating expenditure, 217 billion, 235.5 billion for 1918. 1918 plus 2018. Okay, everybody got it? All right. Okay, good. Huh?
Sir, sorry, can you go back to the development?
Development.
Oh.
This
Okay.
row here. Okay, that's development. Can you see the cursor? That's development. The one that is on the second row, that is the operating expenditure. So you're right, 17, 18, you go. If you want to do more, you know, you can do it. later on. Okay, got it? Now you look at the deficit. Deficit, we just look at the number. And if you look at the deficit, in 2016 it's about 3.1%, and then 3%, then 3.7%. So deficit is also a ratio to the GDP. So as you can see, our deficit is about 3.0 2017, because the government really wants to bring down the deficit under the Datuk Sri Najib's government. At the end of his tenure, we managed to bring it down to 3%. Okay, but after that it goes up again due to some reasons. So that is the deficit, and then we already look at the operating and then the development expenditure. So what you do, you sum up the two things. Okay, you sum up the two things, then you will get the total expenditure. Correct? So you sum the two things, you will get the total expenditure. Okay, everybody finished? Done. Okay, now what I will do, I will show you the GDP so that we can get the ratio. Okay, so next will be the GDP. I will find that. Where is the GDP? Yeah. Okay, GDP. Tadi saya pun dapat GDP. Okay, GDP for, so again, we just need to look at the GDP for the year 2017 and 2018. Don't worry about the thing. We want to look at this one. Okay, the GDP 17, 18. Don't worry about the components. You just look at the total. This is the GDP, the gross GDP. We're not talking about the real, okay? The real, because I don't think the government expenditure was in the real. So we just use the gross. So you have here in the column number F, row F here, okay, that is the GDP for the different years. So you need only 2017, 2018. So you got here 137.1 billion, and for 2018 it's 144.6 billion. So that is the GDP. So now what you do for these 2 years, you take the ratio. All right, take the ratio, and it will give you the relative size of the government in percentage. The ratio of the total expenditure to the GDP. Give me. Apa? Satu dulu. Okay, you got it? Now for 2017, what do you get? Berapa persen? 19.9, right? 19.9 something, right?
19.14. Okay.
19.14. Okay.
90.14.
Okay. So about that, if you go to the literature, the secondary data, they will show you like 20%, 21, 20%. So not that much difference. Okay. For 2018, what do you get?
20.07.
20.07. So the size of the government, I think, okay, from 2010 to 2020, I'm not sure yet. but 2018 is about 20%, plus or minus 2. So that is. But if you look at the size of government over a longer series, you find that now the size is smaller. It used to be much larger. If you go back to 1970s, like I said earlier, 70s, 80s, some of the years it may go up to 40%, and then maintain about 30% something. So that will give you an idea, okay, the size of government. Of course, take into account of the business cycle. As you can see, the government during economic downturn, there is shock to the economy, so the government will increase the expenditure. So if you look at recession for the past 20 years, you'll see that pattern. Okay, during the recession, financial crisis. Anybody remember the financial crisis? 2006, yeah, 2006, I think. So you will see that the size. And I think this year, of course, next year we will know. I think this year the government expenditure will go up, all right, because of the pandemic. And you see, the government has been giving so much transfer payments, all right, in order for the people to face the COVID-19. So that is about the size of the government. Let's look at more detail into the components of the expenditure. We look at the development expenditure. All right, look at the development expenditure. This gives you the size of, or not the size, of course the size, but also the components, all right? The components of the development expenditure, which go under the economic, the social, security, and the general expenditure. Where is the total? Total di kat bawah. Okay, so if you look at the components, you have the economic. So these are related to transportation, communication. So transportation, maybe the expenditure or investment on transport, roads, highway, or all those things. And then you have the education here, all right? And then you have the security, this is public defense. And then the internal security, I think the police force and others. So if you look at the total for 2017, it's about 44.9 billion. 2018, about 54.9 billion. So that is the development expenditure. Okay, all right. Now we just look at the idea, okay? The idea of the development, it's more on investment. And look at the size, okay? Next, we're going to look at the operating expenditure. We look at the components. Okay, yeah. Okay, operating expenditure. You will see this more of maintenance of the government. We also break out into economic, social, and security, and others. So you look at the components, and then you will see you will see the numbers. And then look at the total. All right, look at the total. 217 in 2017. Oh, cantik nombor. 217.7. And then 235.45 in 2018. So that is the size of the operating expenditure. Now, which one is larger, the operating or the development? Which one is larger, to operate the government or to develop? I mean, in terms of expenditure, the government spend more money on what? On operating or on the development? On operating, right? If you look at the relative size, how many percent of the total expenditure is on operating?
More than half, I think, sir.
More than? It's more than 70%, right? It's about 3/4 of
Yes, sir.
the total expenditure is on operating. So that's, if you remember last time we were talking about the size of the government. Okay, the bigger the government, the operating, okay, to maintain or to operate the government become more expensive,
Yeah.
which
Yes, sir.
which could take more money, and that money will go to consumption. All right. If you look at the other component, the development, is just 1/4 of the total expenditure. Okay. All right. Now, if you look at the revenue, go back to the GDP, the first table, the first table that I show you. You look at the revenue, okay, for 2017, 2018, and then you look at the operating expenditure, which you already looked at into more detail a little bit. You look at the development expenditure here. Now, make the comparison between these two, these three lah. You look at the revenue, look at the operating, look at the development, and then you compare, right, the revenue to the total expenditure, which is the sum of these two, which we already have computed. Okay, now you make the comparison. Revenue to the component of the expenditure, to the components of the total expenditure, and to the total expenditure. Okay, what can you say?
The revenue is smaller than the total expenditure.
The revenue is smaller. Okay, that's number one. Number two, if you look at into more detail, look at the deficit. So the smaller, when revenue is smaller than the expenditure, that difference, what we call the deficit. So if like I said earlier, the deficit is about 3% and 3.7%. Now compare that, all right? Compare that to the components of the expenditure. What can you say? You compare the revenue, okay, the total revenue, the first row, to the operating expenditure and to the development expenditure. We renew the first fact, okay? Revenue is less than the total expenditure, so
Yes,
we
sir.
have deficit. So I want to go into a little bit more detail. What can you say about that deficit? The shortage.
The deficit is only on the total expenditure, but if you compare it individually to operating expenditure and development expenditure, the revenue is higher.
Okay, revenue is higher. I've never thought about that. I was thinking about another thing else. Yeah, the revenue is a little bit higher, all right? But there is another thing that I want you to what do you call it? To look at. You compare the revenue to the operating expenditure, and then look at the development expenditure.
Sir,
Yes.
the revenue only able to cover the operating expenditure?
If you look at the revenue, okay, the revenue is about, okay, it's about, of course, revenue is a little bit more, but it's about the to the extent of covering only the operating expenditure. And the development expenditure is about the size of the deficit. Okay, so if you look at of course, if you look at the 2015, 2016, it's also about true. Okay, look at 2018 here. The revenue is 236.15. The operating is about 235.5. You see, so it's about the same. And then you got the development 54.9 billion. So that would be deficit, which is about equal to the development expenditure. So now, how do we cover the the development expenditure? Because our revenue is about the size of the operating expenditure. So how do you cover the development?
By getting foreign direct investments.
Foreign direct investment is more private. Okay. Now we're talking about the government, the public capital. All right.
Borrowing, sir.
Huh?
Borrowing.
You borrow. Okay. So the government borrow. When the government borrow, that will contribute to the deficit, or not deficit lah. That will contribute to the debt. Okay. Of course, that also contribute to the deficit. Will contribute to our debt. All right. So our debt will be accumulated by the borrowing. Okay. And if you look at this few years, of course, you can extend it to the other years. The borrowing mainly is to cover the investment, all right, or to cover the development expenditure. The government mainly borrow. Okay. To the consumption expenditure, you have the revenue to cover it. Now, does it make sense? If we borrow for the development expenditure, does it make sense?
I guess it makes sense in the long term, sir.
It makes sense long term because it is what? It is contributing to capital goods. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Capital goods, as you know, you invest this year, that will become capital. And the return to capital will be what? Will be over long term. Will be over many period of time. So the rationale, okay, the economic rationale of borrowing for investment or for development expenditure is that reason. Because you don't borrow for consumption, okay? You borrow to produce capital goods, like building schools, okay? You build school. The school can be consumed over, many years, and there is return to that capital over many years. So it makes sense to borrow, okay? So that is, the rationale of borrowing for the development expenditure. But if our revenue is getting too low, or in other words, if our operating expenditure is too high, becoming too high, you have to borrow for the operating expenditure. Then, okay, I think then there is a concern there because you are borrowing for consumption. Okay, that would contribute to some bad effect. Okay, any comment, any question? Anything? Okay, so basically, that would be the end of chapter 1. If you look at the book, chapter 1 is about the government. Okay, in other words, we are discussing the size of the government, and then the components of the government, and then the type of expenditure, the type of revenue. So in the chapter, the book is talking about U.S. economy. So we don't do the U.S. economy. We just focus on our own economy. So don't worry about the U.S. economy. If you want, you can go ahead and read. But if you look at the detail of the expenditure and the GDP revenue side of the government, you just consider our country and which is what we just did. Now, what if you want more detail? Okay, if you want to more detail, you can go to the sources of the data. So I would like you to Google this. You know, our time now is very simple. You know, you can just Google. So the sources, you can go to the Treasury, Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Finance, Malaysia. Okay, you have the data, the source, and then you can go to the Bank Negara Malaysia, our central bank, okay, BNM. This is the central bank. And then you can go to the statistic department. Okay. I think for us, statistics department, I think for us, this one will be sufficient. Okay, if you go to the website of the Treasury, you will see economic data. Okay, so you go there, you will see all. All right. Okay, one more thing. I forgot today. Debt. Our government debt. You want to make sure what is the size of our debt. Last class, we are not sure. Okay, we were saying more than 100%. Some say less than 100% of the GDP. So let's check. Tadi saya dah okay ni. So we have the GDP. Okay. So what we'll do, we look at the debt for the 2 years that we were looking at. So this is the debt. This is in Malay. Okay, if you cannot understand Malay, the debt is in row 23 here. You call it hutang. Hutang maknanya debt. Okay, the debt is hutang. Hutang is debt. So this is in Malay. So that column, that row 23 itu hutang. Okay, so hutang is debt. So that give you the magnitude of our national debt. So that is row number 23, and this data is good. You know, it goes back to 1970. So we don't need that. We only need to look at 2017, 2018. All right. So, ya bawah sekali itu apa benda? Oh, bawah tu GDP. Bawah tu GDP. Okay, so that thing here, 2017, this is the debt. Okay, here for 2017, it's 686.8 billion. 2018, 741 billion. So as a ratio to the GDP, that would be about 51%, 52%. Okay, so our debt is about half of the GDP. The only period, okay, if I go back to the 1980s, the only period where you have the debt is high would be in this year here. 1986, 1987. You see here the trend is increasing. 54, 66, 73, 72, 82, 100. And then start to reduce again. Okay.
So was that because of the the Asian financial crisis?
That one, because of a financial crisis. I don't know. This one, financial crisis, 1986, 87. Yeah. Financial crisis. I remember, you know, that time, Datuk Sri Anwar Ibrahim was the finance minister.
That's 97, not 80.
Huh?
That's on 97.
97, eh? Okay, 97, eh?
No.
So that I think maybe that recession much earlier. Siapa dah lupa apa tapi.
It's 97.
So ni recession ni tengok ni. So if you look at 97, 97 not bad. Okay, if 97 is our financial crisis, our debt is not bad. Okay. we have one recession here, okay, 97, and then you have another recession 2006, somewhere here, okay, and then there was a recession in 1980, but we I don't know that. Maybe you can check, okay, what happened here, okay, what happened, or maybe the government is developing the country, so they need to borrow more, so the debt will become higher. So it may not be a recession, okay, it's not necessarily recession. It may contribute also to the need, okay, the need of the government to spend more, you know, in order to develop the country. So probably that's so we can check, you know.
Actually, at 86, there is a recession, not a financial crisis.
Recession, recession apa
Yeah.
tu? What is the name of that recession?
It's due to Volcker shock.
Volcker?
Sebab because
Volcker,
he
that guy, Volcker.
yeah, the Paul Volcker, the US Federal Reserve Chairman at that time.
Yeah, I remember him.
Yeah,
So because of him.
Yeah, because he increases the interest rate, the Fed interest rate.
So that affect the whole economy.
Yeah, because at that time we are an exporter nation,
So
so
affect
we
us.
suffer a lot. Yes,
Okay.
Yeah, our GDP
I will check.
contracted.
You know, it's interesting. I didn't remember that thing because at that time I was a student, so you know, I didn't remember. but you know, maybe check that. But if you look at the cycle, you know, it's quite interesting. Our economic cycle is about 10 years, you know, 10-year cycle. Every 10 years you have a recession. It's either big or small. But, you know, the downturn normally about 10 years. About 10 years. But anyhow, if you look at the debt over the last 20 years, we can say about 45 to 50%. All right? So, not that bad. No? So that is the position of our government. So we have already discussed, you know, briefly, an overview, okay, an overview of the government finance in terms of the expenditure, the revenue, you know, and then how it compared to the GDP. So basically, this will be the basis of our discussion later on in the chapters in the course, because we are going to look at more detail into the expenditures, the types of expenditures, and then we're going to look at more details into the revenue, but we're going to look at from the economic perspective. And we're not going to look at the size. We're not going to look at, you know, how many billion, things like that. We're going to look at the effect, okay, the effect of those expenditure or the changes in expenditure to the economy. So that's what we do, okay? Economists, we don't worry about the numbers that much, right? That the accountant will do. What we are more concerned about, the effect of those numbers on the economy. So that's good thing about us, you know. We do more policy matters, or, you know, the effect of those things on the economy, not just simply the numbers by itself. So that will be the end of chapter number 1. Okay, let me see. Okay. So I think that will be chapter 1. Now for chapter 1, if you look at the book, it has a lot of a long appendix. Okay, a long appendix on the tools. So if you look at the thing, they will give you the budget line, the indifference curve, and then the maximization problem. Now, this is the basic tools that we're going to need. What I will do, I'm not going to cover it by itself, you know. What I will do as we go on, okay, when you apply the tool, then we will discuss it to a certain extent. For example, when we are going to look at the utility maximization problem afterwards, later on. So I will discuss about the budget line, you know, quite detailed. And then we'll discuss about the utility function also a little bit. Okay. So I'm not going to just spend time doing that appendix. We're going to, that will come up, you know, as we move on. So, but that appendix is essential in terms of give us the basic tool of analysis. So that would be chapter number 1. So what I want to do next is we are going to move on to chapter number 2. Now, chapter number 2 is about economic efficiency and the role of the government. Okay, so the idea here is this. We're going to look at the market. Okay, we're going to look at the market, and then we will argue that something happened in the market that justify the government, that justify the role of the government in the economy. So we are going to make use of the market, blame the market to justify we need government. Okay, so the basic idea here is market failure. Basic idea, market failure. Have you heard about market failure? So chapter number 2, okay, we will justify, okay, role of government. So our basic argument is market failure. So we will start with the market economy, and then we argue with that. There are some instances where the market fails, or there is a market failure. So that's when the government has to come in. Okay. So we will start with the market economy. Now, what is our assumption, or what are our assumptions on the market economy? Market economy basically is perfect competition. In our, you know, in the textbook, there is a perfect competitive market. Now, what are the assumptions of perfect competition? Anybody remember? I think you should remember. Either from your intermediate course or the principles of micro. Now, perfect competition, you have very important assumptions. What are they?
Many producer and buyer.
Number 1, you have many buyers and sellers, right? In fact, you know, if you go by the book, there are infinite number. So many buyers, many sellers. So when you have this, nobody has influence on the price. Everybody will be price taker. Okay, what else?
Free entry and
You have free entry and exit. Okay, number 3.
Product.
Homogeneity of the product.
Homogeneity, okay, homogeneous product, identical product. Okay, all these assumption would lead to the perfect competitive outcome. Apa lagi?
No price control.
No price control means no government. No government. It's a free market. Okay, free entry, free exit. There is no government. The government doesn't interfere with the market. Okay, so no government. What else? Ada lagi? I think basically these are the things, right? So when you have these assumptions, you will have a market which the market price and the market quantity will be determined by what? By supply and demand. So no firm, no consumer can influence the price. The price will be determined by the market. Now, when that happened, what happened to the welfare of the consumers and the firms? So if we draw the diagram, okay, so this is Q, that is the 0, That's the price. So under perfect competition, you have the supply function, which just equal to the marginal cost. That's the demand function. Okay. For equilibrium, you have the demand equal to the supply. That would give you the equilibrium quantity, that the equilibrium price. Now, there are a few things about the market outcome here. Number one, welfare is maximized. Okay, welfare is maximum. It's maximized. Now, how do you measure welfare? Welfare is simply the total surplus, which is equal to the consumer surplus plus the producer surplus. So you have, under perfect competition, the consumer surplus is maximum, the producer surplus is also maximum. So that is the, the outcome of market economy. Number two, the price is just equal to the marginal cost, which is also equal to the average cost. In the long run, what happened to the profit? Profit is zero. Okay, so in the long run, the firms do not get positive profit. They will get zero profit in the long run. Of course, in the short run, you can have positive profit. Now, when positive profit, what happened? What happened to the market? If one industry now having positive profit, what happened to the market?
More people enter in the business.
More people, more the supply will increase. Okay, more firms will get in, supply will increase, and that will give you back profit equal to zero. So there will be adjustment. Okay, the market will make adjustment to make sure the profit is zero. If the profit is less than zero, the supply will go down. Okay, the firms will go bankrupt. Some firms will go bankrupt out of the supply. Supply will go down. That will drive back profit to zero. So that is the market. Okay, that's the market. Now the market doesn't always work. Okay, the market doesn't always work, because if you see, the assumptions are quite restrictive. Okay, you look at the assumptions. Okay, the assumptions say you have to have free entry, free exit, so many buyers and so many sellers. You have a homogeneous product. So it's quite restrictive. So when that doesn't happen, you will have a market failure. Okay. Now, one situation where you have a market failure, number one is what? You just look at the market. What happens if there is only one seller? What happened to the market?
Market monopoly means
Apa dia?
lack of market monopoly.
You have the monopoly, right? So one
Yes,
form of market failure is monopoly. You have a monopoly, that means the market doesn't work. The price is not equal to the marginal cost, which is not equal to the average cost. You have the price higher than the marginal cost. Okay, so there is positive profit. So therefore, monopoly is one situation where market fail. So what the government does? So here, market failure. So the government will want to control that. The government doesn't want monopoly. Okay, the government will make sure the market is competitive. The market is competitive. So the government has a role to play here in order to what you call it, to reduce the monopolistic problem in the economy. Because under monopoly, it's not good, because we are paying higher price and we get less quantity. So how does the government play the role to reduce monopoly power? I think in Malaysia you have this,
By the price ceiling?
One is by price control. Okay, the government will just interfere in the market control the price. That's one. What is the other one? Ada lagi?
Open tender.
Open tender. Open tender tu boleh ke? Okay, open tender. Open tender. You have many companies. Now that is for a project. We're talking about a market of a product. Okay, a market of a product.
Control the quantity.
Control quantity pun satu. Okay. What else? How can you make the market more competitive? I'll give you one example. Okay?
Introducing price ceiling.
Price ceiling sama kan? Tadi price control. I'll give you one example. Our communication companies. Communication ni, what I mean is this handphone, okay? Handphone company. Okay. Now, how does the government make it more competitive? Monopoly, only one company, right? One company. Katakan dulu,
Yes, sir.
you got only Celcom. Okay. Let's say, initially there is only one company, Celcom. Now, what happened now?
We have Maxis, TM,
You
DG.
have Maxis, you have many more. Okay. So what the government does to make the market more competitive, the government will ensure easier entry. Okay. Easier entry for other firms to be in the market. For example, Celcom. Okay, let's say Celcom was the initial monopoly. The price, of course, very high for us. After that, you got Maxis. After that, you got DG. You got XOX. Apa benda lah sekarang dah banyak. So, make easier entry so that the market will become more competitive. So, when you make easier entry, the government do not interfere in the market. Okay, like price control. Price control, you interfere in the market. You control the price. But here, you make it more competitive by what? By making the number of sellers higher. So the price will go down. Okay, so that's one. Number two, there are public goods. So when you have public goods, the market fail here. Okay, because the market do not provide public good. Now, what is a public good? Public good is like, give me an example. Probably you cannot define what is public good. Give me an example of a public good.
Public parks.
Apa dia?
Public parks.
Public park. Okay, a park. National defense. Okay, one good example of a public good is the national defense, the defense of the country, or the national security, the police force. Okay, now, does the private sector provide defense? Does the private sector provide the police force for the country? No, they cannot.
No, sir.
Okay, so when you have public good, the market fail, the market cannot provide. So the government will come in. Okay, number three, you have externalities. Now, in terms of the assumption of perfect competition, one assumption is there is no externality. All right, the personal interest or your self-interest is actually contributing to social interest. Our own interest will be social interest. So there is no externality. But in real life, your own interest may not be the social interest. Okay? So therefore, there is externality. Now, the market do not consider externality, either in terms of production or either in terms of consumption. So therefore, government need to come in. Now, if you recall, okay, in Selangor recently.
Yes, sir.
Apa dia externality Selangor? We have this
Water disruption.
Water disruption. That is an externality. That company, situated near the river, just pump the waste into the river. Everybody, the whole state of Selangor is out of water. You know, so that is one. Now, one externality. What is the worst externality for the past 1 year?
Well, we're having the pandemic, COVID-19.
COVID-19. Okay, China give us an externality, COVID-19. They should pay for us for the global economy. You know, due to that thing, the whole economy, the global economy is like standing still. You know, you cannot go out of the country. You know, it's really, you know, this China must be responsible for this. Okay, anyhow, that is one example of facility. The other would be what? Would be what do you call this? Equity. Now, for the market, okay, as you look at the market, you have supply equals to demand. The marginal cost is the price. That is efficient. Okay, so the market only talk about efficiency. No, it doesn't talk about equity. It doesn't care about equity. So equity, all right, we want to have more justice in terms of distribution of income, in terms of distribution of resources. So equity, the market doesn't take care, or the market fail there. So in order to address the equity problem, the government has a role to play. So in terms of equity, you know, that is about what? That's about value, you know. It's about economic justice. It's fairness. So we want to make sure there is a fairness, or there is economic justice in terms of distribution of resources and income. So that is one way. So government will provide mechanism to redistribute, okay, resources or income. I think that is the main thing, all right? That is the main sources of market failure. Also, okay, also number 5, if we're talking about economic cycle, right? Recession, then the economy is doing well. Now, in recession, if you look at the classical economy, which is the market economy, what are we going to do in recession?
Increase consumption.
No. We just look at the market. You know, the market, just market, perfect competitive market. If there is a recession, then is there a role for the government? There's no role for the government. Okay, under the market economy, if you have recession, okay, if you have recession, in other words, if you look at this diagram, recession means economic downturn. We have reduction of income. The demand will go down. Okay, demand will go down. As you can see here, the price will go down. Once it will go down, you see the firms will suffer losses. But under the market economy, the argument is either recession or economic boom, the market will make what? Will make self-adjustment. You don't need government to do that. Okay, what is the self-adjustment here? Suppose, you know, you have a reduction in income, demand will go down. So what is the market? How do the market adjust? And here, as you know, the firms is suffering losses. So what happened?
The market will reduce supply.
The supply will go down. Is that right?
Yes.
The supply will go down, and therefore you will have another equilibrium, and that will make adjustment. So the market will self-adjust. So supply will go down. Supply go down. The shift left is right. Left right. Then to up.
To the left, sir.
Supply will go down like that. Okay, so you get equilibrium somewhere here, where the profit is back to zero. Quantity will be So it doesn't matter. They don't worry about the, the effect of that recession on the income. The market will adjust itself. Okay, but reality it doesn't work that way. So government play a role in economic stabilization. Okay, economic stabilization. So government will make certain policy to stabilize the economy. All right. During recession, they will make policy in order to bring the economy up. During upturn, they will make sure that it doesn't get into uncontrollable situation. So that's the role of the government. But if you look at the market, the principles of the market economy, the government don't have to do it. Let the market make the self adjustment, okay, through supply demand. So basically, all right, basically, these are the arguments for which come under market failure, and that will justify the role of the government. So, in essence, these are our main topic. The number one will be externality. Number two, public good. And then you look at the income distribution. We don't look at this one too much. Economic stabilization, we don't. Monopoly, we don't do that. All right. So focus a bit on these three. And of course, we look at the expenditure side and the revenue side as well. So that would be chapter number 2. Now, chapter number 2 is basically, I would say, a brief discussion. Okay? Our concern is only to argue that market failure will justify the role of the government, a more active role of the government in the economy. All right. So it is slightly different than the chapter 2 in the book. I don't really follow what it is given here in the book. All right. But the main point are about similar. Look at page 67. Okay. The market failure, which is the review of the basis of the government. So that is only how much we cover for chapter number 2. We look at the perfect competitive market, and then we argue that some situation the market fail or market failure, there is a market failure. So that will justify the role of the government in the economy. So basically, that is chapter number 2. Okay. Any question? Anything? Any comment?
Yes, sir. I have a question that might not be related as much to what we've learned, but 2 questions actually. May I?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so my first question is, in an advent of the budget 2021 being tabled this November, how does the government prioritize which to spend or which to put in the budget? That's my first question. And the second is, how does the government allocate?
Wait.
Okay.
Just one question first.
Okay.
You have to ask the Prime Minister. In November, I'm not sure who will be the Prime Minister. Is it Muhyiddin Yassin? Or is it Tengku Razali? Or is it Anwar Ibrahim?
I don't know, I'm just asking from before, from our history, how does the government prioritize actually?
But if you go by Muhyiddin Yassin, okay, now I think we can understand, Muhyiddin Yassin is one who is concerned about the welfare, okay, the welfare of the people.
Okay.
He is willing to gamble on increased deficit because, even though you have the pandemic, if you look at Guan Eng, Lim Guan Eng, he will argue, we don't have money. Okay, we don't have money. So that is his main argument. We don't have money. Whatever it is, we cannot spend on welfare that much. But if you look at Muhyiddin Yassin, he is quite different. He's willing to take that gamble. for the welfare of the people. I think I like that. Okay, I like him in that sense. But of course, you know, in order for him to maintain his power, he give the GLC to everybody. I don't think that's very good, you know. But anyhow, if Muhyiddin Yassin is giving the budget, I would say, okay, he will spend more probably on the welfare programs, not necessarily transfer payment. Maybe some investment type of welfare investment, maybe to give retraining, okay, training of these retrenched workers, training of, you know, of young people in order to be more competitive to face the labor market. I think he will do that. And also, I would think he will reactivate some of the projects of the government, which was put on hold under Barisan Harapan. Okay, that will stimulate the economy, which is needed by next year. So I think he will focus on that. But if Anwar Ibrahim becomes the prime minister, and DAP will take the finance minister, then I don't think that will happen. Okay, I hope.
So basically what you're saying is that we don't have like a basic framework or a rule to which how to prioritize what to spend or input in the budget. So it depends on the government.
That one I don't know. Okay, maybe the government has, but that one I don't know. Okay, that one probably the Ministry of Finance, they have that framework, but the final say will be what? Will be the finance minister and the government. Okay, because that's their what is their objective. Okay, if you look at the PH government, their objective is to limit spending so that deficit will be controlled. Why? Because they were saying during the Najib period, we have extravagant spending. You know, you spend more money on unnecessary project. So now we have to control all this spending. I think to a certain extent that's correct. But doesn't mean you have to scrap all the project. Okay, you make it more efficient. In other words, reduce the corruption, make sure you know the cost is manageable. I think Lim Guan Eng did that, you know, to a certain extent, in order to reduce the cost of the government. So, but the guideline, I don't know. Okay, because I'm not in the government. We can only see. Okay, can only see after the budget is out. Then you can only make comment. So, that question, I actually cannot give you. My answer is only my opinion. All right.
Understood, sir.
Okay. Okay. And what's your second question?
My second question is related. It's about how does the government allocate funds for short, medium, or long-term projects? So basically, quite related lah.
That's a good question. So that one probably kita kena, you know, we have to do well some reading. All right. But okay, if you look at Tun Mahathir, I think because he was the prime minister many years, his long-term, what do you call it, Vision 2020. This year, you know, he has a Vision 2020 set up how many years ago? 20 years ago, or so that is the long term. Okay, that's a long term. The Vision 2020. I think that is one vision that we have for our country. Unfortunately, he was not prime minister this year because that is the Vision 2020 is initiated by Tun Mahathir. That is our long term. Now the short term. What is the short term?
Welfare and development, maybe.
The short term is the 5-year plan. You know, Malaysia has 5-year plan. Okay.
Oh yes.
5-year plan. Every 5 years they have a 5-year plan. I think the latest 5-year plan was by Mahathir because he was prime minister under PH. And then you have the very short term, which is what? Which is the yearly budget. Okay, 5-year plan, and then you have the yearly budget. So yearly budget every year is presented by the government. That is very short period. Okay, or you can say long term, Vision 2020, which is covering I think 20 years or I think 20 years. You check how many years, and then you have the apa benda ni? You have the medium term. You can say medium term, the 5-year plan, and then you have the apa? The short-term plan, the 1 year, okay, 1 year budget. So we can think of it that way: short term, medium term, long term. But the detail, okay, the detail may change. So I do not know, okay, whether what is our status in terms of achieving the Vision 2020. Are we close? Are we far? Are we in between? So I think this year they might make a study, you know, to do that. Okay, anything else?
No, sir.
Okay, what is your name?
Adura.
Adura. Oh, okay. Okay, thank you, Adura. Any other question? All right. So if there is nothing else, I think that's it for today. Next week, our next class, I will give you, no, I will give you, we start our discussion on chapter number 3. So chapter 1 and 2 is just introduction, all right? Just go through this, and especially if you want to look at the Malaysian data, you go to the treasury, like I said earlier, you know, just look at the government finance and then the GDP. And I just show you a few of those, but you can look at the data. It's always interesting. Okay, so I will see you again. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh. Okay.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Waalaikumsalam. Thank you, sir.
Okay, this should be price taker. Okay, yeah, loosen the entry.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.